Hello everybody, Jose Rodriguez back again. We're going to do a very detailed tour through the Canon IPF Pro 1000 driver. Now, I am on a Windows 10 machine, so this may look different to you if you are a Mac user, but bear with me. Some of the options and features should be available in both operating systems. So let's go ahead and quickly jump over to the screen. We'll do a quick look around the driver and then we'll explore it in more depth. All right, here is the Pro 1000. In order to access all of the features, we're going to right click and choose Printer Preferences. We'll go ahead and minimize this. We'll bring this up to the center position. All right, so we have basically the main page, quick setup. We have main page setup and maintenance. Let's go ahead and explore what it is that we have here available. And you can basically directly work off of this main quick setup page. You really do not need to access anything else for most of your printing. Now, if you are printing a document, you're going to definitely choose standard. Shows you a type of document with possible a bit of graphics, but we're going to be concentrating on photo printing, so we'll choose that. And do not click preview before printing, folks. Do not do that. There seems to be a problem with a false color cast that might be introduced. So you're better off not previewing before you print, okay? So make sure that is always turned off. We're going to remove borderless. We're going to go ahead and choose either black and white. If you're going to print from an RGB file that you wanted to print in monochrome, you can directly do that by choosing black and white. But let's go ahead and begin with basically just normal photo printing. So we have our image open. So let's just assume for ease of explanation here that we are going to be printing on, say, Photo Paper Pro Platinum from Canon, although there are many other choices here. So this is where you choose your paper. And here's where you choose your quality. And for this particular choice, we have two choices, highest and high. What is that in DPI? No clue at this point. I know there's a way to access that, but I really do not know what that is at this point. Now, here's where you choose your paper size. These are all the standard sizes that the printer can do without you having to create a custom size. We're going to feed through the top feeder. That's the one on the very top. You have the so-called rear or manual feeder, and that's really for your thicker papers. And normally, if you were to choose, say, a fine art paper, such as what is included in this category here, you might be told to use the so-called manual feeder in that case. And this is just simply a straighter pathway through the printer so that if your paper happens to be a little bit stiff or thicker than normal, it will not have any kind of mechanical problems as it advances through the printer. Now, if you are printing an image, then it's imperative that you always click on this color intensity manual adjustment. Again, this is for you Windows users. And here we're going to choose matching. Always do that. And because we are printing on Canon paper, as you can see here, we can simply let the driver do the job of matching that paper to the correct matching ICC profile that is already installed in your hard drive. So again, either this or that. Now this, you would choose ICM if you want to basically print on that paper, but on a profile that you created. Click on Auto and choose that paper profile. Find it and then choose it. Here you can choose your quality and here your rendering intent, and we always use relative colorimetric here. All right, so that is it. Now my printer is ready to print to this paper here, of course using OEM inks, and it will be matched to that profile. You should get a perfectly neutral result. If something else happens, that means that your monitor may not be calibrated and you have actually altered the look or the neutrality of your image so that it looks correct on your monitor, which was not rendering the colors correctly to begin with because it was not properly calibrated. That means your results are going to be skewed. Now let's jump over to the main page. Now this is basically a more advanced version of this page. So you have your paper choices here, just like you did in the previous example, and you have some advanced settings. Let's look at those. So here you can actually set the drying time. I have not really done much of this experimentation, and I assume it means that it just takes longer to print. Maybe I need to look into that. You can always turn that to none. I have it at printer default, whatever that may be, and I have never had any problems with smudging of my finished prints. In fact, immediately after they exit the printer. The print head height. So say you are getting maybe a little bit of what looks like scratches, or the printer is actually hitting the edges of the paper for whatever the reason. It could be that your paper is slightly curled. Well, avoid paper abrasion. When you choose that, however, it's not going to automatically begin to print. It's going to wait for you to give it the final OK. So when you hit the print button, it's going to then display this, hey, I'm still waiting here for you to approve my job. Okay. If you don't want that kind of wait, then don't set it to avoid paper abrasion. As long as you're not seeing any kind of artifact related to head strikes or any of the sort. And it could be as simple as a paper that maybe in a dark area where it received a lot of ink density, it has buckled and risen a little bit higher than it should be. And that causes scraping by the printhead. Paper vacuum. Now, you either turn it off or leave it on. Why would you want to turn that off, right? Leave it alone. Leave it on the default. Unidirectional printing. That means it will print in only one direction of the printhead travel rather than both. What does that mean? Well, it's going to take twice as long to print. But if you're having any kind of mild banding problems where it cannot be solved by a head alignment and your nozzle check is perfect, then you may have to be forced to use unidirectional printing. Calibration value. When you calibrate your Pro 1000 internally, when you first set it up, you have the choice to print using that value. Of course, you want to do that. Not the printer default. It just basically will ignore the calibration you performed. Okay, so use that value, and that is it. Set it to OK. Remember, when you calibrate your printer, you're bringing it as close to factory specifications as far as output goes. And it may differ because these printers are mass produced. They're not all going to output identically. So once you calibrate it, it's about as close to perfect as it's going to be. So you want to use that value. You don't want to ignore it. Okay. Here you can choose several other settings. Print quality, highest, high, custom. Some papers may have standard available. Some papers may not. Color intensity. I have that set over here. Remember? Manual adjustment. All right. So let's jump back over here. You can set that here. You can access that there just like we did earlier. We don't need to do that again because basically it's the same thing. Do not choose preview before printing. And if you want to print, say, like a raw file that you convert it to monochrome, then of course you may want to choose this mode rather than print it using all of your colors. You may get a more accurate, more neutral result using the black and white photo print, and basically that acts as a different type of setup for you. Page setup tab. Here are the different types of layouts that you can set up. Normal size, borderless, fit to page, scaled, and page layout. I leave it at normal size all the time. Now, here's something important. Your page size. Okay, that does not mean paper size. That means your layout that you send to it has to be the same size as the paper you're printing on. So as long as this is set to same as paper size, whatever paper I choose will actually work. Otherwise, you may end up with an image that's a different size, printed on a larger paper, and it'll be tucked up, say, in the upper left corner somewhere. It's not what you want, folks. So you make sure that you have this always will read same as paper size. Okay. Orientation, you can set that here. I like to do that in my image editor anyway. I don't like to do that in my printer. I always have my printer set to portrait, and this applies to any other of my 17 printers that I actively have going at this point. Now, this is if you're going to be creating, say, a booklet, and you want to make sure that everything is shifted to the right a little bit or to the left, depending what margin you're going to be stapling these sheets of paper on. Print options. This is important. This is where we get to choose certain things. Now, disable ICM required from application software. leave that off. You don't want to disable that. Disable the color profile setting. You don't want to disable that either. Disable the paper source. In other words, this is going to then ignore telling you that you should be using the manual feeder. If it wants you to use the manual feeder, you should use the manual feeder. Okay? It's preventing you from possibly scratching or possibly having the print head hit the edge of the paper if it's slightly curled. So leave that alone. Ungroup papers. Well, remember, we had the photo papers and we had the fine art papers. This will basically separate them all. They'll all be listed as single units. You'll have a huge list rather than have basically folders of specific categories of paper. So leave that unchecked, or if you want all your papers names all loose, then go ahead and click on that. Do not allow application software to compress print data. Click that on. You don't want that to happen. Print after creating print data by page. You could turn that on or off. It doesn't really matter. I usually leave it off. Now, here's the important one that you Pro 1000 users get to do that Pro 10 or Pro 1 or Pro 100 users cannot. You can disable that huge leading and trailing edge margin when you print using the fine art setting and the manual feeder. Now you will be able to have narrower borders. It's not going to nag you. It's not going to force you into basically changing your layout, because now you're going to have about an inch worth of leading and trailing edge border. This we leave always on weak. Don't ask me why. Unit of print data processing, recommend that we just leave that alone as well. All right, let's jump over to the maintenance tab. This is kind of fun here. Cleaning cycles. So you're going to do a cleaning cycle. Why? Because your nozzle check shows that some of the channels may require help. Some of the nozzles may not be firing. But you know what? Why should you do all colors when maybe only the photo gray needs to be treated? Pick that group. Not all groups. At least you're able to pick a group that contains the channel that needs help. If it's this channel, it happens to be photo black or matte black or chrome optimizer or gray, that's the group you will choose. Same thing here. Blue, yellow, magenta, photo cyan. Pick that group. Do not choose all colors. You'll be wasting ink on all the other colors unnecessarily. They don't need to be cleaned. Okay, so don't choose all colors. Always look at your nozzle check, and whatever channel it is that requires help, choose that one. Now, you may have to do this twice if two colors in two different groups require help. Again, you may not need to have these activated, so why do so? Leave them all alone, only the ones that you need help with. This is a regular cleaning. As you see, only one droplet. This was a deeper cleaning, shows 3 droplets. It's just an amount. And then the system cleaning basically is a huge one. It's almost like an ink refill. Okay? Only if absolutely necessary. Nozzle check. Anytime, and I repeat, anytime. Say yesterday, everything was printing neutrally. Today you have some kind of weird color cast. Run this. Print check pattern and check to see if a channel is not providing ink. Say, for instance, something is looking mostly magenta and cyan. There's really no yellowish tint anywhere. It might be your yellow channel. And the opposite holds true. So make sure anytime you actually see a problem that did not exist either 2 hours ago or yesterday, run a nozzle check. Do not spend time screwing around, doing this and that, figuring out what could be wrong, running cleaning cycles unnecessarily. Do the nozzle check first, and that will tell you if indeed you need to run a cleaning cycle. And remember, try to isolate it only to the group containing that particular color. Now, online resources, this takes you to the resource page on Canon. You can access all sorts of things there. That is a nice little function. Now, this is a little bit more advanced. So say you have access to the media configuration tool and you know how to configure an unknown media, meaning you're going to figure out what the required ink density is for that particular surface, that particular type of paper base. You know what the thickness of the paper is, you know what the stiffness is, you know what the print head gap should be, all of these things. You create this configuration, which is then saved to a specific file, and then you load it to your printer. Then from your printer, it has to be sent where? To the driver, and you do that here. It will then appear as yet another tab in your media choice, and I believe it's going to be custom. And if you open that up, you will find all your custom configurations there. Now, some paper manufacturers will provide you with a configuration file that you can download, install in your printer through the media configuration tool, and then install it to your driver by using this little mode right here. Basically, you click on that and you say execute. Whatever media configurations have been stored in your printer will then be transferred over to your driver. Then you have to reboot your driver for them to become visible. They don't appear automatically. Now, you can turn your printer off from a remote location. My printer's on the next room, so I can turn it off right here if I choose to do so. Of course, I do not. It stays on constantly. Auto power. It is highly recommended that you leave your printer on. So disable both choices. Normally, they will be set at enable. The same thing here, and you'll have some sort of timer where it will basically turn itself off after so many minutes of non-use. So leave them both on disable. Every time I do that, I have to reapply the settings. Now, let's talk a little bit about print heads. Now, the print heads on Canon printers are thermal type print heads. That means that they heat the droplets of ink. So as you print, if there's any problem whatsoever, you may increase the operating temperature or the actual temperature of your print as you are printing, say, numerous prints. So one way to sort of maintain a cooler operating temperature, or one that is at the non-dangerous margin, is just like in your car. If you drive 100 miles an hour constantly, your engine's going to run hot. So we're going to slow down the printer. Yeah, I know. Nobody wants a slow printer. But believe me, it doesn't really matter. You're printing art prints. I don't care if they take 10 minutes, 20 minutes, or 30 minutes. I'm not in a hurry. So always use quiet mode. What does that mean? It just simply means it just runs slower. After each pass of the print head, it pauses. And it's really not that much, folks, okay? That little pause will allow the printhead to run a little bit cooler. Okay, that's all it is. Actually, it even runs quieter. All right, let's look at this now. Custom settings. Rotate 90 degrees left when orientation is landscape. Just leave it off. Don't detect mismatch of paper settings when printing from computer. Leave that on. I'll explain why in a minute. Disable paper width detection when printing from computer. I usually leave that off, but you can have it activated if you wish. Let's talk about what that means. So on your screen on your printer, if you take a close look, you can choose paper type, you can choose paper size, you can choose quality, you can choose everything. If you don't have that little thing checked to basically accept a mismatch, because on your computer screen and on the driver on your computer, you may choose to print 13 by 19, but your printer is set for letter size. It would not allow you to print. It would give you a mismatch error. So I make sure that I tell it to ignore a paper mismatch. So if you are plagued with paper mismatch errors, you have to click on that box to tell it to ignore that. And that will save you a lot of headaches and a lot of hair pulling, folks, because it's not going to then bug you constantly about that. All right, thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed that small tour through the Pro 1000 driver. Now, the rest of the Canon type printers have a similar type of UI, and although they have different features available depending on the model printer that you own. Next, I'm going to choose maybe the P800 from Epson, and we'll go through that driver and show you the differences. You have to realize that all different drivers have different UIs and the way that they have arranged their features. Again, it's just something you have to learn from each model printer that you own. Especially if you are on a Mac, the user interface is going to be different as well. So again, just be aware that that is the way these printer companies operate. All right, so thank you so much. Again, don't forget to subscribe, share, and like. And as always, happy printing, everybody. Bye-bye.